In the near future, millions of people suddenly disappeared from Earth without a trace, and the news outlets intensely covered the event. The disappearances happened abruptly, although there had been many previous warnings. Even so, high-ranking politicians categorically deny any divine involvement, and no one wants to remember that the Bible had already warned about the rapture. Several theories arise to explain the events, including alien plots and as yet unexplained natural phenomena. At that moment, the oligarch Jonathan Stonegal decides to buy the world's largest information system, called Eden, and build a temple for a new religion. Despite rising crime rates around the planet, Rayford Steele, a pilot who lost his family, is one of the directly affected. Alone, he remembers how his wife Irene tried to guide him to God and took him to New Age church services, but he was never in a hurry to follow the path of faith. Everything changes when, mid-flight at 9 kilometers altitude, some passengers disappear from the plane. It is at that moment that he understands the rapture Irene had mentioned had really happened. Now Ray deeply feels the absence of his wife and son and begins to want to believe in the rapture. One day, journalist Cameron Buck Williams presents a broadcast dedicated to the recent disappearances. In recent times, the world has witnessed an increase in violent crimes, and experts predict an even more critical situation. His guest, Dr. Kim Cage, is investigating this pandemic of evil and insists that a second wave of disappearances is approaching, something that she says was predicted by a computer. As Buck begins to ask more difficult questions about the source of the data, the broadcast is interrupted. At the same time at home, Ray meets with his daughter Chloe, who decided to return to work. Meanwhile, Buck, annoyed, tries to find out who interrupted his broadcast and goes to look for his boss, Steve Plank. On the way, the cameraman stops him and apologizes for what happened, explaining that he couldn't go against the higher-ups. Buck reminds Steve that he could simply prevent those who spread fear without explaining its origins from coming on air. Many people lost their loved ones. What they need is understanding, not stories that generate panic. At that moment, Steve's secretary announces an article reporting that Nicolae Carpathia, former Romanian ambassador, has been appointed the new UN Secretary General, but Steve shows no interest. He threatens to cancel Buck's show if he doesn't follow orders. Outraged, Buck walks away. Meanwhile, Chloe remembers her missing brother and feels guilty. Buck, on the other hand, is watching Nicolae's speech, in which he calls for all world governments to unite to form a single global state. After that, Buck calls his friend Dirk, who suggests they discuss the matter in person in an isolated location. Meanwhile, Chloe has a nightmare where she begs the Lord to let her into the room where her brother is. He shakes his head in denial, and she keeps knocking on the door in vain. Her father wakes her and says that everyone has difficulty dealing with what happened, but Irene always asks them to think about the future. At that moment, Dirk reveals to Buck that a data analysis company has been supplying unverified data to the UN backed by fake research reports. The truth is that no one has concrete information about the number or identity of the disappeared. In reality, they are manufacturing the crisis themselves. Dirk shows a clear scheme of how various corporations control the world. 15 TV channels, 120 stations, 300 newspapers, and even pharmaceutical companies. Among the names involved is Steve Plank. Although Buck believes the TV studio is run by a well-known business family, Dirk reminds him that no one has ever seen this family. Stonegal is the real owner of the companies and has been promoting a global reset for years. Buck was on a plane during the disappearance, where he met a remarkable young woman. He shows a photo of himself next to Chloe. Dirk leads him to a room where he has prepared a hiding place in a secure safe, where he stores a password-protected hard drive containing a season of The Simpsons series. Later, Chloe goes to meet Buck, who shares Dirk's discovery and admits that he doesn't want to be part of this anymore. He truly believed he was telling people the truth, but now understands he was being manipulated. At that moment, all devices receive a message announcing the start of a second wave of disappearances. Buck rushes to the studio and once again tries to find at least one witness. Guests cite various sources, suggesting the disappearances may have occurred even in prehistoric times, but there is still no concrete proof about the rapture. Buck then suggests that new technologies may be deceiving millions of people. Soon after, a message arrives about the start of a UN conference, where Stonegal is speaking and calling everyone to unite against a new threat. With the beginning of the Great Reset, many countries will go bankrupt, while others will plunge into poverty. That is why the UN approves a single payment system, Eden, created by scientist Rosenzweig, who delivers it for free to the unified government. Buck goes live with Stonegal, who admits that the first step is to establish peace in the Middle East. Later, Buck points out to Steve that the second wave unfolded exactly as predicted by Dr. Kim Cage, who, as revealed, is collaborating with supporters of a one-world government that uses fear of catastrophes as a strategy. Even so, Buck never found anyone who could verify the reality of the second appearance. 90% of the data came from Stonegal's company. Steve forbids Buck from telling the public about his findings. Meanwhile, Ray checks Irene's phone and finds the Bible. But strangely, the search function returns no chapters about the rapture. The New Hope Church account is locked, and the pastor's number has disappeared from the contacts. The man drives to the church building and finds locked doors and broken windows. With a golf club, Ray enters through the back door and finds the pastor in a destroyed sanctuary. At the same time, Chloe is attacked by a criminal. She manages to keep her purse but injures her hand during the fight. While gathering her belongings, Chloe finds a pamphlet from the New Hope Church where Ray is helping the injured pastor during a break-in. The pastor is certain that the disappearance is really the rapture, so Ray's wife and son are safe. He asks Ray to leave him there so he can finish his tasks. Meanwhile, Chloe seeks help from a doctor she knows, who takes her to a clinic to treat the cut, and later introduces her to a dying patient. Ray, in turn, tries to find a scientific basis for the ascension. The pastor points out his mistake. The Bible speaks of 7 years of peace between Israel and its enemies, and on that day, the name of the Antichrist will be revealed. A false Christ who comes to deceive humanity. The pastor admits that he never truly believed in all of it, which is why he is a false teacher, as the Bible also predicted. He gives Ray a video meant for those who were left behind. Meanwhile, the doctor and her patient try to convince Chloe to believe in the reality of what's happening, as her mother wholeheartedly believed. Chloe doesn't understand why there are still believers present. Ray continues listening to a sermon in which the preacher recalls Paul's letter to the Corinthians, where he warned about the ascension and called for faith in the Lord. The pastor joins Ray, who for the first time begins to pray with true awareness. Meanwhile, Dirk tries to hack into Eden's main server, even without the password. Suddenly, he receives a message from an unknown person who knows what he is doing and provides the password. Dirk accesses the system. A former co-worker of Ray appears, still interested in continuing the romance that had started between them. Now she is going to work at the UN and is willing to recommend Ray. But he refuses. He is sure the rapture happened and has already accepted Jesus. She leaves, unwilling to hear anything about God. Dirk informs Buck that the Eden system contains a gigantic amount of data, and it seems someone intends to reveal it to the world. Meanwhile, TV broadcasts Nicolae Carpathia's arrival at the UN, where he is received by a cheerful crowd. Buck goes to Dirk, who shows that, beyond the financial system, Eden monitors biometric data and social profiles. Whoever controls Eden will control the entire world, even basic food purchases. The person who sent the password is willing to hand over all the data so Buck can expose the truth. Dirk proposes to give the interview in Buck's place. That way, if he's arrested, Buck will still be able to reveal everything to humanity. Later, the journalist admits to his assistant that he has found a real information bomb, unaware that a colleague is photographing his documents before alerting management. Meanwhile, Ray tries to convince Chloe to go to church, but she refuses. The sick woman overhears and demands to be taken to the pastor. At the office, Steve announces that Buck is fired. In the meantime, Ray finds boxes with pamphlets in the church that explain everything. At that moment, some women arrive with Chloe, ready to hear what the pastor has to say. Dirk points to a line in the code showing 3 dates: the day of the first disappearance, the start of the second wave, and a third date 3 days later. But the code was written long before. It is revealed that Eden's creator already knew everything even before the disappearances began. Buck again tries to find someone who lost loved ones in the second wave. He asks Dirk to enter 3 names into the system, but discovers these people don't exist. The two go to find whoever sent the password. Buck helps the cameraman carry equipment, while Dirk organizes the boxes and notices a bomb with a timer in the cabin. He manages to alert his friends. An explosion happens, and Dirk dies in the fire. Meanwhile, the pastor answers Chloe's questions about why some people who didn't believe in God also disappeared, explaining that Jesus warned his followers about this. One must pray to find the way and protection from disasters because half of those who remained will die. The pastor shows Bible verses that talk about the ascension, and suddenly Chloe leaves. At the same time, Stonegal and Rosenzweig ask for Carpathia's support for their project, but he is confident everything is already working well without his help. At church, the pastor reminds everyone that Judgment Day will come in the middle of the 7-year period, when the Antichrist will declare himself God, and the whole world will believe in him. Chloe goes to a cemetery, and Buck visits Dirk's secret hideout, where he accesses his laptop. Federal agents appear and begin a chase, so Buck is forced to hide in a dumpster. One of the agents, angry at losing him, shoots the dumpster and hits the laptop. Meanwhile, Stonegal reveals to Nicolai that he chose him as his successor. Buck receives a message from the cameraman saying that federal agents are destroying the studio, and that Buck's assistant apparently drowned in the bathtub. Before signing off, the cameraman states that everything happening now was already predicted in the Bible. Meanwhile, the doctor asks Ray some questions. She says her husband and his wife were true believers, so she wants to know why Ray didn't believe back then. He thinks he was just careless and foolish. But now he has finally heard Irene. Having faith means seeking Christ even with doubts. All you have to do is open the door for the Lord who is knocking now. Later, Buck finds Chloe at the grave she dug for her mother. They open the coffin and find only a dress, irrefutable proof of the rapture and God's existence. They head to the church where the faithful are gathered, but Buck refuses to believe, while Chloe stays by her father's side. The journalist contacts Rosenzweig and tells him everything he discovered about Stonegal, who used the Eden system for personal purposes by adding spyware. The scientist goes to Nicolai, who asks him to bring Buck along. At this point, Ray shows Buck his discoveries based on Bible study. Buck mocks these theories, but suddenly notices a phrase that turns out to be Eden's password and begins examining Ray's diagram. It is revealed that, to build the Eden Temple and achieve a peaceful agreement with Israel, something only possible with Stonegal manipulating everything behind the scenes, this would indicate that he is the Antichrist. Buck doesn't believe it. He has already seen what Eden contains and understands that whoever controls the system will have power over the entire world. Buck leaves, taking with him a crucifix he received from Chloe. The next morning, he meets with Rosenzweig, who explains he has long dreamed of building a temple on the Temple Mount, which is why he was so enthusiastic about Stonegal's proposal. Buck hears about the first 7-year peace agreement and realizes he was wrong. The man asks God for forgiveness and guidance to follow the right path. He calls the cameraman and asks for help. They head to the UN, where Buck announces that Stonegal intends not only to take all the world's money, but also plunge the planet into technocratic chaos. Upon hearing this, Nikolai claims he can reveal what will happen next. A killer disguised as a security guard pulls a gun and tries to kill everyone. At that moment, Nikolai takes the pistol himself and shoots Rosenzweig and Stonegal. Everyone else watches the execution in total tranquility, and Nikolai declares he must take the reins of power. Only afterward do people seem to regain consciousness, insisting that the security guard was responsible for the shootings. The journalist calls his cameraman for help, and the cameraman, already in a car, begins to broadcast the images Buck sends from a completely different location. Nikolai starts his press conference, but suddenly the screen changes and Buck presents the true version of events, debunking the UN Secretary-General's speech about the unexpected disappearances. Some agents try to locate Buck but only find his phone after he has already exposed the politicians' lies to the world. Buck manages to escape and arrives at an airfield where Ray, Chloe, and the pastor are boarding a plane. As they take off, the pastor observes the group's growing faith, reminding them not to forget that the second coming is still 7 years away. Years that will be the worst in all of human history. The plane flies over the city, dropping numerous New Age church pamphlets, which are picked up by the people, thus ending Left Behind, Rise of the Antichrist, the 2023 science fiction and mystery film.